And here we go. Hey, and welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. We'll give everybody a minute or so here to pile on in, and then we will get this shindig started. How's everybody doing today? Another awesome Wednesday. Say first Wednesday in July this year. Tyler, did you turn your lamp off?
Yeah, I normally turn it off because it has a
A
super
gray.
glare on this.
I was like, your room's a little darker.
Yeah, my room is really dependent on what the outside looks like.
Gotta love it. Soon as the webinar starts, Amazon decides to deliver a package. All right, we'll give it like one more minute. All right, cool. I think that about does it. We're not going to waste too much more time. Once again, thanks for joining us, everybody. This is going to be another awesome workshop, hopefully. We're going to be talking about emulating APT33 today. So this should be a fun little exercise. Of note, you would have gotten a registration email today from CourseStack. It would have been a no reply at CourseStack with your invitation to the lab workspace. If you did not receive that, please let us know down in the chat or in Q&A or something like that. That way we can get you sorted out, okay? And with that, I think we should get rolling, Tyler. So, first off, the normal, who are we?
Yeah, hi everybody. I am Tyler Casey. I'm the lead detection engineer and the deputy of SCYTHE Labs over here at SCYTHE. Excuse me. I have about 10 years of experience doing DCO, which is defensive cyber operations. Currently, I run the blue side of our purple team engagements, and I'm responsible for a lot of the threat emulations that we put out every month. Before I came over to SCYTHE, I was on a cyber protection team where we essentially performed targeted threat hunting operations all over the world. So I have my socials up here on the screen. I'd love to connect.
And hey, I am Trey. I am the lead over here at SCYTHE Labs and Professional Services. All of our kind of crazy cool content, these workshops, stuff like that you see getting put out, that is me and my team and the man down here, Tyler, or up here, depending on how he shows up in your view. My background is pretty varied, 17 plus years at this point in IT and cyber as a whole, doing everything from red teaming to threat hunting, working as consultant, an educator, content creator, and a little bit of everything, kind of really. Backgrounds primarily DoD, moving into private industry afterwards. If you like alphabet soup, I've got some of mine down there on the bullet points, and my socials are there if you would like to connect. And again, just another reminder, you would have gotten an email similar to this inviting you to our workshop. This gives you access to the lab manual, the environment we built for you, all of that fun stuff. If you did not receive an email that looks similar to the one I have on the screen, please let us know. We want to make sure you guys are registered and you can get set up and running quickly and on time. Okay, so we got a few.
Probably got a couple of them. Just give me a second to add you guys to it.
Sort this first.
Everyone that's putting it in the chat, I'm just going to send you a message to send me your email. And that's how I will add you to the workshop.
All right, cool. So while Tyler and Jared handle this stuff, we will get on rolling. So what are we covering today? Quick table of contents. We're going to be talking about APT33, obviously. We'll cover the kind of the who's, the what's, the whys. What are they up to recently? Show off some kind of cool stuff, information about the threat actor group as a whole. We'll talk about how we can operationalize some CTI. We'll take some of this recent reporting, kind of bring it all together and pull out some actionable procedures from it. From there, we'll get into actually doing the thing. We're going to take all of that CTI, those procedures we pulled out, and craft those into a threat plan and actually put it to work. Once we've built out our threat campaign, we've ran it, we're going to start talking about some detections and utilizing that threat signal that we generated to turn around and validate our defenses. Sound like a plan? So, APT33, who has not heard of this group before? Maybe you've heard of them from another name. It might be something like Refined Kitten, Peach Sandstorm, Holmium. There's what, six, seven, eight, nine other ones, depending on what particular security vendor you follow. Has anyone not heard of this threat group before? Cool. Sounds like it's pretty common one. That's to be expected. This is a rather large group. Before I dive a little further, actually, I'll throw one thing out there. For those of you guys that are here that are with us, we love it when you participate. If you guys are being responsive, it makes this whole thing a lot smoother, makes it a lot more fun for us as well as for you guys. And to top it off, at the end, we may or may not be raffling off some swag. And if you're participating, you're answering questions, you're asking questions, your name might get thrown in the hat for that raffle. So just keep that in mind. But anyways, APT33. They're an Iranian state-sponsored threat group. They're mostly known to be tied to the IRGC. They're part of their threat intelligence cell, basically, their strategic intelligence and military interests. They've been active since at least 2013. They've been seen still actually active as recent as late 2024 in most of the current reporting. Their common targets as a country perspective, they're mainly looking at some of like their near peer neighbors, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and us in the United States here, if you're from this side of the world. Really, all of these countries that are aligning with those state interests and the interest of the IRGC. From a market or a vertical perspective, they're typically focused on aerospace, energy, things like chemical production, and government entities, as they're trying to kind of get in, find new information, get a hold of some IP, and enhance their overall growth priorities as a nation. From their overall motivations, a lot of it does tie into that their priorities as a nation. It ties into things like IP theft, but also the disruption of their competitors and their near peers in the same level, trying to kind of slow everybody else down. That's a little bit on who they are, kind of a general concept and ideas. Talk about a few of their TTPs real quick. From this nice, pretty little graphic you guys can see here, they're pretty spread out over the kill chain. They target everything from the the individual to doing phishing campaigns. They're doing all kinds of research, reach out over social media. They're looking at your cloud infrastructure. They're doing stuff like password reuse, just trying to find a way in, really, however they can get a hold of it and find a foothold. From there, what's gotten really interesting here lately, especially from a behavior perspective, is some of their new malware and tools that they're utilizing have all been revamped. They're doing some pretty interesting things. One notably is the tickler malware is what it's called. I didn't name it. That's just what it's been called out in threat research. They use a lot of like fake job lures. They're doing things like malicious zip files and even using like duplicate file extensions to potentially trick users. That's been a pretty cool TTP we've seen here lately. And then some of the other key things I would mention here too is like their privesc and persistence methods are all kind of tried and true, right? They're not doing anything crazy or bleeding edge here. They're doing things like setting registry keys and run once keys and startup folder stuff. They're using scheduled tasks. All the standard things you see from pretty much any other threat actor or group or campaign, doesn't matter what's happening. They're using those same behaviors. So that can make attribution a little hard, but it also shows that the same stuff's still working, so why necessarily advance the way you're doing it, right? You don't have to as a threat. That's just a little bit on who they are, they're kind of their TTPs, and a quick breakdown of APT33 or Peach Sandstorm as a whole. Anybody have any questions over that kind of basic information before we move on? We'll deep dive into these TTPs a lot more here later when you guys start diving into some OSINT, digging through CTI, and actually creating a threat plan. So give it a second, see if anyone drops a question in chat. And have no fear, if you guys think this is about to be a slide fest today, it is not. I think over the whole 3 or 4 hours, we have what, maybe 30 slides, counting the title slide, Tyler. So there's not a lot going on. We want to make sure you guys have as much hands-on time as possible. Uh, Andrew, so where did we find and gather most of the TTPs was his question. It's kind of varied for this course and what you guys are going to be working with. Some of it came from some recent reporting from Microsoft. Some of this actually came from MITRE and some SCYTHE alerts. It's a little bit of all over the place. But the primary ones I would say would be Microsoft and MITRE. Some references to some CrowdStrike reporting and general information as well. So another question down there, are they announcing their activities or is it figured out based on their behavior? For my understanding, a lot of what we've been seeing is they're not necessarily announcing their activities because that's not how these kind of state sponsors groups necessarily work. This kind of stuff, they're being found out from incident response and doing triage. People are recognizing based on the behaviors, the way the C2 ties back, the way the payloads and all the binaries are built and compiled, and using that to kind of attribute these campaigns and what we're seeing to this threat actor. So from John, are they associated with 0 days or just published CVEs? So that one's actually a really interesting question, and I would be curious if anyone else has seen anything or maybe find something today. And most of the reporting I have seen, I didn't see anything with them really taking advantage of like bleeding edge, like 0 days or anything like that. A lot of the time, they were taking advantage of published CVEs. And what was kind of interesting, in several of the reporting I saw from 2023 and 2024, they were still taking advantage of CVEs from like 2015 and 2017. So they're not doing anything super crazy, at least from what I had seen. Okay. So with that, we will move on. I'm going to pass the torch. Me and Tyler are going to do a little bit of a flip-flop here through the slides. Again, if you guys are still having any issues with core stack, let us know. We'll make sure you're sorted before the first lab. Take it away, Tyler.
Alrighty. So yeah, Trade kind of already hit on it that we need to find some CTI in order to then create our emulation, right? We need to see what the adversary is doing. So now we know that we're trying to look for APT33. We need to gather some actionable intelligence, and then we're going to turn that into our threat emulation plan. Next slide. Trey, you are the controller of the slides. All right. So in that, we're just going to kind of briefly go over what CTI is, where to find it, what good CTI should look like, and then we'll drop down into the labs, and then when we get into the labs, you'll actually go in and find some of it on your own. So coming up first is what is actionable. We need our CTI to be actionable so we can take it and utilize it to closely emulate the actions that we see APT33 doing, right? So on the left over here, we can see that it's not super helpful. This is what a lot of very, very high level CTI looks like from a more strategic level. That's not really what we're looking for, right? On the left, it mentions a few tools that are involved, some misconfigurations, but that's really it. There's nothing we can kind of pull out of this to try to make into a threat, right? And this slide and the next slide are not APT33 specific. This is just kind of generalities. We'll get into the APT33 specific CTI again when we get into the lab. So yeah, on the left, not super actionable, not really too much going on. Probably something you would find from maybe not a super great CTI link. On the right, we're getting a little bit better. We can see some tactics that are listed, but there's still a bit of a gap in between what we see here on the right and what is actually going to be actionable, like what we could turn into actual procedures or commands. So something like enumerating system information such as host name or host configuration, domain information, things like that. That's great to know that they do that. But again, it doesn't really tell us how they're doing it, and it doesn't give us a clear or concise way to do it on our own, right? Next slide. So what we're looking for is something more like this, right? This is really the best possible case scenario that you can have. Often you're not going to find things that are this just kind of copy and paste from it, but this is more of what we're looking for, right? So they have listed out commands or procedures that were observed from a Medusa ransomware campaign, and having this level of detail and specificity will allow us to essentially just copy and paste and mimic exactly what the adversaries are doing, right? This is a very simple example, but just running these exact commands will give us exactly what that group is doing. So we want something from our CTI that's actionable that we can take, and that can be as closely related to what the adversary is doing during their campaign, so we could be as close to them as possible. CTI like this is great also because it says up at the top, like, these services are stopped by Medusa ransomware. We can clearly see the services that they're trying to stop. They're all related to either EDR or antivirus, things like that. So we can tell from this little snippet that by providing some context, the adversary, Medusa ransomware in this instance, is probably trying to disable all of these ahead of time to then kind of clear out their way for some future impacts on objectives in the actual ransomware that they're going to run later on. Next slide. But most commonly, what you are going to see is something kind of like this, right? Where you have a good bit of information. It kind of covers the strategic and tactical levels of CTI that you're going to get, but you're going to have to extract some things through that and kind of fill the gaps a little bit. Excuse me. So like I said, most often it's going to look something like this. That will still give us a lot of good information, but we're still going to have to kind of rely on our experience and maybe some other reports that we've read to go in and extract some of this CTI out to be actionable. So we can see that the last step we have highlighted here, that upon execution, the ransomware used VSS admin to delete shadow copies before encrypting the host. So this tells us a bit, right? It tells us that they are using VSS admin. They are deleting shadow copies, but it doesn't give us the exact commands that they're using. If they're using any kind of tools or anything like that, we know they're using the VSS admin binary to do it. So based off of maybe our experience, we know that APT33 or a lot of APT groups in general are utilizing living off the land techniques. So I think it's probably safe to say they're going to use just the living off the land binary of VSS admin to delete the shadow copies. It wouldn't make any sense for them to delete one and not all of them. So we can kind of infer that they're going to run that command at the bottom where they delete all of the shadow copies using VSS admin. Kind of the same thing up there, starting from the top again. This is a snippet from Black Seed ransomware. So we see that they are deploying the binary QWE, which then is distributed over SMB. So if they're distributing it over SMB, they're probably using something like a network share or utilizing some tooling such as maybe SMB client, or that they're mapping some additional shares to get it around. We know that they have created or that we know that they've created a binary called QWE.exe. That's something that we can emulate or look for more as well. And then we see for them to laterally move across that they're using RDP. RDP again is a living off the land binary that anybody has access to. So we should be able to emulate that and kind of distill all of these points down, like you see here, that you see there on the bottom, to then take it from this paragraph to some actionable items that we can then do on our own. 1 second. Does anybody have any? Can you go back? Anybody have any questions on this? Does this kind of make sense? Is this what everybody kind of sees when they're looking, when they try to pull some CTI on their own, or trying to kind of distill it down from having this chunk paragraph and turning it into something again that is more actionable? That's what we need.
And we do have several kind of different things going on here, and we're kind of showing off some concepts ahead of time when it comes to reading, interpreting, and kind of filling in the gaps when it comes to CTI. This is a great example of us being able to kind of read this and natively understand, okay, they're targeting Windows. They're using stuff that's just built into the endpoint. They're not bringing any crazy tools in, at least within this paragraph or this portion of their kill chain. And then they're kicking off utilizing their ransomware. It's deleting shadow copies and moving on. So based on that, we can infer what kind of tools and things we have to use to emulate this threat behavior, the general layout of that kill chain, and overall just what we need to kind of generate this threat signal. Does that make sense to you guys?
All right.
Cool.
Next slide. All right. So into that, we kind of very briefly talked about CTI, but where are you going to find some quality CTI? If you don't have access to like closed source intelligence or things that you pay for, CTI subscriptions, things like that, that generally is not a problem. There is a ton of free and open source CTI sources out there, right? We use these resources all the time. We try not to rely on closed source intelligence. We try to use what's publicly available in a lot of our threats. But what you see here, the screenshot, is probably how Trey and Jared and I start our day most of the time, is looking at InfoSec Ninja's start.me page. It's got all of these CTI resources we have listed out over here on the left included in it. It's like a RSS feed base, so it's constantly updated. You can constantly see new stuff coming in. It's a great kind of one-stop shop to be able to go in and view some new CTI, right? And then some in there that we think add some extra value, or really have a lot of good write-ups, is CISA, their alerts and advisory page. Them and the DFIR report are probably the best two sources of open CTI that we see, right? CISA puts out updates a lot more often because they're a government agency. So they put that out a lot more often and a lot more frequently than some of these other companies. But they have some really great information on there. And then next up, the DFIR report has super, super detailed reporting. They're not released as often. I believe that they have some open and some closed source intelligence or subscriptions that you can pay for, but they have great reporting. Google Tag as well. MITRE ATT&CK, I'm sure everybody knows. They're not just T codes, tactics, and techniques. They also have a groups page where you can go in and look at specific adversaries. They try to list out all of the naming standards, all the nomenclature that they have listed on the page there. So it's a really great spot to find information on your adversary. Seeing that title cybersecurity is really good as well. Great call out. And then Unit 42 has a lot of great write-ups that you can use. All of them have free reporting that you can go ahead and utilize, and it's just a really great place to start. I'll drop all those links in the chat for you guys as well, so you can see them.
Yeah, and you should also have access to all of these in the lab manual also.
Yep.
I just want to touch on SCYTHE again. Like, we can't state enough how good their reporting has been lately over the last couple of years, it's been extremely detailed, all the way down to like procedural level stuff that you can directly use, not just IOCs and things like that and hash values. And they're putting out alerts. Some days we'll see, like I get alerts from SCYTHE like 7, 8 times a day some days. It's not just one here and there. So just a quick call out for that again. If you guys haven't checked those out lately, or you're not at least getting those alerts, you really should be paying attention to SCYTHE.
Yeah, and it's more than just excuse me, more than just like named threat actors. It's on CVEs and proof of concepts and like general trends. Yeah, it's really great. We highly recommend that you check it out. All right, next slide. So while we may have the CTI comes with kind of hurdles that are built into it. Um, the first hurdle that you will have to kind of overcome is that CTI is historic. It has to be historic, right? Because CTI threat, cyber threat intelligence is based off of things that were observed during a campaign by an adversary. So you can't write a report on something that hasn't happened yet, right? You can't list out the observed behaviors if the campaign hasn't happened, right? So just kind of by nature, CTI is historic. It can also be tied up in, if there's an active investigation or if the threat actors may be going after some government systems and things are classified or things like that. It might take a while for them to get released. So just kind of know that the adversary's tactics can change a little bit over time. Their behaviors can change a little bit over time. We know that their TTPs are the hardest for them to change. So those seem to persist the longest. If you're familiar with David Bianco's Pyramid of Pain, you know that the TTPs are up there at the top. So the TTPs are most likely to kind of persist over years. We've seen the same TTPs by some threat actors over 10 years or so. It's just the procedures, maybe the command line arguments are changing or the tools are changing a little bit. So you just need to be abreast of that and just make sure that you're continually updating the CTI that you have on a threat actor, especially if they are inside of your kind of threat landscape, right? And then the other part of it is that CTI often won't have a completely full picture of it. That again is because CTI is based off of what is observed and what is assumed by the researchers that are writing up the CTI. So if something isn't observed and the researcher has to put in an assumption, like let's say, like back to that black suit binary we were talking about, the QWE, if they're able to see QWE is on multiple systems, but they don't know exactly how, they can't prove exactly how it got there, but maybe there's some RDP logs that exist around the same time that that executable was dropped, you kind of make an assumption that that's how it's done, right? Not saying that that's what happened in that instance. It's just an example. But a lot of times, yeah, you won't have a completely full picture, and you'll have to either rely on the assumptions of the researcher or kind of create your own assumptions as you're going through it. Take your own best guesses based off of your experience, things that you've read, what you know about this threat group or APTs in general, and kind of have to figure it out on your own and able to get a full emulation plan, kind of an initial access all the way down to impacts on objectives. Next slide. All right. So in this instance, we went through, we found all of the CTI. We've been able to distill it down a little bit. We know a little bit about the TTPs that the threat actor is doing. What do we do with it now? A thing that I harp on a lot is that documentation is the most important thing, right? Documentation is so important. So how we recommend that you guys go and take this kind of raw CTI that you have, maybe you just distilled it down a little bit, take this raw CTI that you have and put it into our threat emulation plan that we have kind of documented down here on the bottom right. So it's nothing crazy. It's just like a simple spreadsheet that we have with tactics, techniques, procedures, and the reference. Having all of it kind of in there before you go to actually create your emulation is going to just help keep you on track, right? It's almost like anything else. It's just like an outline. What is also really useful with the threat emulation plan is the procedures that you have in there. They will not always be exactly the procedures that were ran. So in some of the CTI that you're looking at, if instead of it saying that they did an uh, WE CL system, which is clearing of the security logs, if they don't have that exact command in there. In the procedure instead, you could just write that the adversary cleared system logs, right? And then when you get to that emulation spot, when you're actually doing the emulation, that you will need to either go back and read some more reports, get some more information, or just do some research on how somebody would do that. And then from there, you can decide the procedure and kind of fill the gap in that way. But I'll we will be going through in the lab here in a minute and going through finding some CTI and adding it to our threat emulation plan. So you guys will see how this is done in action here in a few minutes.
So just kind of a little expansion here for you guys on documenting these procedures. He hit a good point there with maybe they didn't say in the reporting you were reading how they cleared event logs or anything like that. We typically look at this several different ways. If the reporting we're looking at doesn't have the information we need, we might expand our bubble, right? We'll look at previous reporting on the same threat actor, see if we can find a behavior that fills that gap that we need that they've been seen doing previously. If not, we'll kind of look at near peer. Okay, who's very similar, who's working in the same spaces, who's doing the same kind of things, and find a way that they've done it before. We've noticed a lot of the time some of these behaviors are pretty consistent across named threat actors. So we'll use something from a near peer or someone similar. In worst case scenario, we can't find really anything useful in any close reporting. We'll kind of just use our knowledge and experience of the systems we're trying to emulate this threat on and decide how we want to do it. So when in doubt, we kind of get creative and figure it out on our own.
Sure. All right. Next slide, and I believe that should take us into our first lab time. So for the first lab, we're going to do, as like I said a few minutes ago, we're going to look at some CTI, and we're going to distill it down into our threat emulation plan. We're going to have you research APT33. We have some links in there. Find that CTI. Interested in what everybody is finding. If you find anything interesting as you're going through it, and then kind of as a precursor to that, in the lab itself, we have a familiarization chunk up there in the top. So it'll just kind of walk you through core stack, Scythe a little bit about Splunk, and then have you create your first campaign via Scythe. We'll use the output from that campaign later on. So we should go through, if you're looking at the chapters, get through all of the getting started, and then through the documenting our behaviors. Say, Trey, you stop sharing for a second? I'll share mine just to show what it looks like in core stack.
Yep. So that's what I was doing myself, was
Oh.
pulling it up. You go ahead though.
Alrighty. So in there, yeah, if you once you're inside of the lab itself, you can see the chapters over here on the left. So all of getting started, this is just a video we have there. Scythe familiarization all the way down. The Scythe and Splunk familiarization is just if you don't have any background in these two, just like a little Kickstarter, just kind of make you aware of it, and then creating that first campaign in Scythe, and then getting into the actual documentation of our behaviors. And then what you want to do also is on the left under systems, you're going to want to launch your group. What that's going to do is start all of the VMs that we're going to utilize in the lab. The only one you'll need to connect to is this unicorn host. You'll be able to reach the internet and Scythe and Splunk and everything else that you need to do from the unicorn host. So you won't need to connect to any of the other ones. And then as soon as this system is ready, it will ungray out itself. You'll be able to click on it. So with that, I think we had for the lab 20 to 35 minutes. So we'll call it 20 minutes and then check on everybody and see how everyone's doing. Again, if you don't have the link to the labs, just throw them in the chat. We're adding them as quickly as they come in. And if anybody has any issues or questions, please let us know. Like I said, we'll give it about 15, 20 minutes and see how everyone's doing.
So you guys are probably still going through the familiarization section. Maybe you're getting started in the documenting section. I just wanted to point out real quick in some of these sections. At the bottom of APT 33, there is a references tab with three quick links that you could start with if you're not sure where you want to go. You do also have access to all of the other resources we threw in chat earlier if you wanted to do a little bit of searching in Google Foo on your own. The stuff I would say pay attention to while you're looking through and reading these references is what kind of behaviors are you being presented with? Are you seeing any consistencies within the reporting from source to source on something that the threat actor is doing? And just looking for anything generally interesting or that kind of stands out as unique to you. At the end of this time here, we'll probably talk and discuss a few of these different behaviors, TTPs, and resources. Okay, so how's everybody feeling so far? Everyone's still kind of digging into some CTI, looking at the resources we provided there? Do you guys want a few more minutes to continue looking and documenting a few things, or you guys want to push ahead? Okay, we got one for keeping the cart moving. So we got one each way. Okay.
Yeah, I think we should go over, just do a quick demo of the site familiarization of doing that first campaign, and then give it a little bit more for looking at the CTI.
Yeah, I figure we can give them like five more, then go through a live demo and whatnot.
Okay, sounds good.
Cool. So yeah, we'll throw a bit more time on the clock and then we will come back. All right, we are back. So what we're gonna do, just give you guys a few extra minutes too, if you're still looking through some CTI. Tyler down here is going to do a quick demo of the walkthrough on the familiarization sections, and then we'll go from that into deep diving into talking about some of the CTI you guys were researching. Sound good?
Do. Alrighty, so should have my both my screens shared now. Seeing thumbs up, sweet. So yeah, just kind of go through just some of the intro and familiarization stuff. While you guys are still looking at some CTI. So we have on this first one here, just kind of going through, just kind of some Scythisms, how to use different modules and things like that. Again, just really a, a reference for what we're going to be doing later on when we actually turn our CTI into a threat campaign, right? When we turn our threat emulation plan into a campaign that we're going to execute on the system. I don't know why LibreOffice keeps like updating itself 1,000 times on my other screen. Um, Okay. And then also, so we have the site familiarization, then we have a Splunk familiarization. We're going to be hunting for these adversarial behaviors towards the end of the workshop if there's time. So just like a quick starter into what Splunk is, themes in general, how to do searches, things like that. Again, really more of just a reference if you're not familiar with it. Those will be more useful later on. And then into kind of the first hands-on part of the lab is just building that first campaign out. Again, just to make you familiar with Scythe. So when we get to actually doing our threat emulation plan in Scythe later on, you're familiar with where the buttons are and things like that. So the first thing we'll do is just to create a threat, um, a custom threat. So we'll go into here once you're logged on to Scythe. You should be able to get to Scythe and Splunk. If you can't, please let us know. Sometimes there's an issue with DNS based on the boot order. If Scythe or the Splunk VMs come up before the domain controller, sometimes the DNS won't update correctly. So if you're not able to get to these, please let us know and we'll get that fixed for you. But anyway, so inside of Scythe, go in and click these buttons. We'll create a campaign. Can give it a name, first campaign. I'll call it first campaign 1 because I already made one. You don't need a description. The defaults are fine. And we'll get into loading some modules. So the modules are, if you've read, kind of like they are there to help you perform certain actions, right? So ARP is going to, run ARP. It's going to give you the ARP request. Crypt will encrypt files. Discover, elevate. A lot of these are pretty self-explanatory. We can refer back to the guide if we need to, but we'll do that. We'll do print screen and we'll do run. Um, for this lab, run and upshell will probably be what we will be utilizing later on to run these procedures. They run essentially works just like having a terminal open, so just like having command prompt or PowerShell open, and then upshell is unmanaged PowerShell. But more on that later. So we've got the modules loaded. We'll go down to execute an action, and you can do a custom action, but for these, we're just going to do some of the kind of the preloaded ones. So we'll do ARP, Windows print screen. We'll run Who Am I? And then we'll scroll back up to the attack techniques. So this is really useful if you're trying to emulate a certain TTP or a certain tactic. So in this instance, we want to do system time discovery. Maybe in your CTI, you see that an adversary is doing system time discovery or doing some other TTP. If you're not sure how to emulate that, this is a great way to have these kind of already filled out for you to to go in and modify from there. So system time discovery, local host is fine. We're not going to do any remote host. And then that'll tag it and add it to your campaign over there. Once that's done, we can save it. I've already saved it, so I'm not going to do it again. And then we'll create the campaign. So we have our campaigns made. These are the same. I made one earlier. We'll click the download. So we'll click over on the left and download. We'll download this as a DLL. Change this entry point to DLL register server. And that just tells you how or what the entry point is to that DLL function. You can leave it as absolute client main, but we like to just show that you can change it up. So we'll download the unverified file. We'll open it. I will launch command prompt from here. And then in that, we'll run dll32.exe, and we'll run first campaign, comma, DLL register. That's not how you spell it. DLL register server, just like it has it typed out there. Should have just copied and pasted it. And then once you do that, oh no. Once you do that, if you give it a second, we should get a check-in. Back to this. Oh, I forgot that in the lab we have you rename it. That's what I get for not following my own instructions, huh?
Hey, it's all good. Point still gets across.
And yeah, let me do. Screen is hung up here. Run DLL 32. Oh, it's because I'm not in. Let me switch it to PowerShell. There we go. Forgot that it's not in the path if I do it that way. DLL 32 and then DLL register server. Enter that going through, and then we should get a check-in here in a second. Once we get a check-in, just like this, we'll get a little checkbox. You can click that. You see the host that it was launched on, and then we'll see the campaign steps pop up as they load and go through. So right now it's doing the loader. We'll give it a second to show some of the other stuff. State is still pending for the first campaign binary to download. How long should that take? So the download should be pretty much immediate. The only thing that you might get hung up on is because we're not doing any obfuscation or anything like that with this. So when you go to first download it, you might have to select, I'll download this one. When you go to download it, DLL, change this to DLL register server, download client. You might get a pop-up over here. So that's probably what it's hung up on. So you could just click the arrow and then download the unverified file, and that should download it.
Yeah, that campaign state with the like nice little orange bar, that's going to say pending until you have initial execution happen.
Yep.
Once it happens, you should see it change to green like on Tyler's screen.
Yep. And then in here, if you want to see, the request and response of the commands that you ran, just click the drop down. And then if you have additional commands that you want to run, or in this instance, we tell you to just do controller shutdown, you can open the shell and type that in. You could also run additional commands that you want in the shell to give you more of an interactive feel. I'm not going to turn my implant off just because I like to leave it running. So if you have not done the controller shutdown, you could leave it if you would like to, or you could terminate the campaign. Totally up to you. But and that was just kind of the familiarization into it. There was one other piece that I wanted to show. So in this, we get into a little bit more of the profile. We're trying to keep the slides kind of more bare bones and have the labs be more specific on APT33 and some of the procedures that we're gonna emulate. We have our main references for APT33 down there at the bottom, and then we have a bit of like a starter CSV or threat emulation plan. So we have it listed out here in this table view, but if you download this spreadsheet, what you can do then is drag it over to your Unicorn host box here. That you'll get that it has been transferred over there. If you open up File Explorer from there and go to this PC and the Guacamole file system, that's where anything that you push to get uploaded will be at. So if you want to upload any files into your Unicorn host box or anything like that, that's how you do it, and this is how you access it. And then from there, we have LibreOffice installed on this box. Mine made me do a bunch of updates for some reason, so yours might take a few minutes to do updates. But if you want to update the threat emulation plan with what you're finding, I think that's probably the easiest way for you guys to do it. Are there any questions on that? Alrighty. Trey, back over to you.
All right, cool. Well, if you guys didn't have any direct questions over the familiarization piece or what was going on there, let's talk about what you guys saw. Was there anything interesting from a CTI perspective that you guys found outside of the references we used, or even maybe looking at the ones we provided? Any behaviors stand out? Or did anybody find any good links outside of the ones we provided? I'd be curious to see what you guys found. Give people a second to respond if they're typing it out. Oh, they are. Let's see while you guys are typing for a second, I'll give you quick little breakdown here. So we provided with an easy little diamond model card real quick. If you guys aren't familiar with CTI or working in this kind of a space that often utilizes it, you might have seen something like this before. It's just a quick breakdown of like known infrastructure, victims, and capabilities tied to specific threats. So we made this one a little while back for an internal threat that we had released. We brought in a whole breakdown of like who they are, their aliases, targeting. So this one was more in depth than the slide we talked about earlier. So we wanted to make sure you guys had as much info as possible and could have a good understanding of who it is you're trying to emulate. Jared, can you help Bev, please?
Yep, got it.
So yeah, with those for the building a threat outline and stuff like that, like Tyler said, we provided you guys with some examples on how to go about doing it. I'm more concerned with talking about some of the resources you guys utilized. One of the ones that I found the most interesting for me was this Microsoft report on Peach Sandstorm. It's their name for APT33. It dove into a lot of different procedures altogether. Yeah, John, that's actually a really good point. That confused me for a bit too. I wanted to make sure like it wasn't a fluke and I read that on some random blog, but that same call out is actually called by several other major cyber vendors with them having targeted Korea in the past. So I thought that was actually kind of interesting. Good call there. Okay. Yeah, this one from the Microsoft document, this one was really interesting. They talked through a lot of behaviors and procedures. We can see that they started focusing a lot more on password spraying, trying to gain access to cloud resources. They've been doing a lot more digging on social media, like I had said earlier. A lot of that is called out here in the way they're doing things as well. The part that sticks out to me most, and we'll talk about a bit more in depth here in a few slides, was these two new malware variants that have been seen. One called Tickler, the other called Sold, which was kind of like a an upgrade to the Tickler malware platform. It broke down what they are, kind of how they operate, all of the other files and things that they're pulling in, and how they're setting persistence on top of what they're doing from a cloud perspective with like Azure resource abuse and like their lateral movement and like RMM tool use. All in all, there's not a ton of like really, I would say, like procedural level intelligence in this one, but Microsoft painted a good enough picture that we could understand what was happening and read between the lines and make a really cool threat from it. Did anybody see any others that they thought were very helpful or gave you some good ideas on actionable behaviors that you could utilize? Okay. Well, if not, in the meantime, last two, then we'll move on to actually doing the thing and threat emulation piece of this. If you haven't looked at it yet, a lot of people know what MITRE ATT&CK is. We mentioned it a little bit earlier in the CTI section, where they've got, the whole enterprise ICS, mobile matrix, all of that fun stuff with different TTPs and behaviors. A lot of people don't realize that they publish this CTI section now in MITRE ATT&CK as well. Underneath there, you can search by groups, softwares, campaigns, anything like that. all of the collective intelligence that they've gathered throughout the years and they've utilized to develop these matrices, they've made centrally available to everyone as well. So you can search by group names. You can search through any of those specific behaviors. And from that, they tie you, give you a quick breakdown who they are, who they target, and some of their like most commonly seen techniques utilized. So this is a great example of, well, we're not quite sure maybe how they were stealing credentials. Well, MITRE breaks down, hey, in the past, we've seen them taking them out of credential stores and web browsers and things like that using tools like Lasagna. So that gives us a really good starting point for that particular behavior in the kill chain. Hopefully that makes a bit of sense. But this CTI resource from MITRE is great. And again, it's free. That's everybody's favorite price, right? Free 99. The last one, this one wasn't directly talked about, but it's one I like to show because it ends up being a good starting point for me sometimes. If I'm having issues finding out how actors are doing specific things, maybe I'm looking for a behavior or how a specific variant of a piece of malware is working, I like to go to Malpedia and search based on like the malware name or threat actor name, things like that. They've done a really good job of tagging the associated malware families with threat actors or threat groups they've seen using it before in the past. And it gives you a quick references page too with the dates that they were published. So you can see how far back these articles went, what it's talking about, everything like that. So it's a easy little cheat code, I would say, is one that I use typically if I'm looking for some more behaviors and I'm not quite finding what I want from my normal Google foo. Google foo. Okay. So from this point, hopefully you had a chance to get through the getting started section and the documenting our behaviors, and you've got some interesting TTPs you're going to try out in the next section. What we're going to move on and cover from a slide perspective is that whole threat emulation 101 piece. So no, and we're not doing too bad on time either. Cool. So a few more slides in this section and another lab. So let's get into it. Let's talk threat emulation. What is it? If you've never heard this term before, you might have heard of adversarial emulation, threat simulation. Pick your verbiage. All they're realistically saying here is like emulating that actual real world threat to test your defenses as an organization and improve your overall response to those threats. A lot of people kind of get caught up in the, oh, what's the new hotness? What's the new 0 day of the week? Are we protected from this? Do we have issues? But then they forget that, well, those have to be taken advantage of by someone, right? It's not just going to be a random chance thing. They don't pay attention to who's targeting them and how they typically behave. If you understand the behavior of the threats you're facing, you'll have a much better idea of one, how your defenses stand up to their typical behavior, but what gaps you need to fill. And that's the overall kind of purpose of what we're shooting for here when we're thinking about threat emulation. All of that to shorten it down to say TLDR, just be the threat. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to be that threat so that we can do some good in our organization. So, how are we going to go about this whole process of emulating adversary capabilities? Well, first off, all of the CTI we were just reading through and looking at over the last 35 minutes or so is going to be our perfect starting point. That's going to tell us here recently, what have these threats been doing that I'm concerned with? What kind of behaviors are they exhibiting that might affect me? If it's stuff like, hey, they're very much targeting all kinds of stuff when it comes to FortiGate firewalls and using their end days and taking advantages of a bunch of old CVEs. Okay, that's cool. At least I understand that's a part of their common behavior is to look at your external infrastructure. But I don't run Fortinet. Maybe I run all Cisco stuff, so I don't really care. That's what we're trying to do here and trust in that CTI to give us that good kind of lay of the land and where we need to go from a emulation perspective. Next one here, we talked about this a bit during the CTI piece where it might have some gaps. It's a little historic. We don't always get the full picture. Well, sometimes you're going to have, it's just a fact of life. You're going to have gaps. There's going to be missing information. A lot of the time, CTI in itself kind of is still tied up in all kinds of different incident response, maybe legal proceedings, things like that. So it makes it hard for us at times to understand what's going on. That means we might have to get a little creative and go through the process we were talking about earlier before to come up with our behaviors. Who's a near peer to the threat we're concerned with? What do they typically do? Can I emulate that? If so, maybe we add that to the list, or we get creative, fill the gap in. The last piece here I want to talk to you real fast. When we're thinking about emulating an adversary's capabilities, we're not talking exact replication. You're not trying to do the exact same thing because it's limited value there, right? Like my previous example, if that threat actor has been known here in the last 3 months to specifically target Fortinet firewalls utilizing some specific vulnerability, is there benefit to you emulating that vulnerability against your organization if you guys don't have any kind of Fortinet hardware, software, anything going on in your environments? No, right? It wouldn't really make sense for you guys to do that. So we're not looking for that exact replication. We're looking more for a practical accuracy. Can I emulate their behaviors, what they're doing, how they typically compromise other organizations, but do it in a manner that is effective for me in my environment? The whole goal here, you're really trying to prioritize driving threat signal so that your defenders can actually learn, understand if they can see what's happening, what's going on, if your alerts and detection rules and all of that other crazy automation you guys might be doing now is working properly, and if they can even respond to that threat signal. Understanding how you respond to these threats is probably one of the biggest benefits that we've seen organizations get. We run a lot of purple team engagements and other assessments with organizations pretty frequently. And one of the biggest wins we've always seen is we'll ask you to test your incident response procedures, look at your policies, and see how your team organically responds to that signal on the wire. And a lot of the times, most organizations realize they missed something, or they have a gap in their process, or maybe they don't actually have access to the whole IR playbook. So they've got to kind of figure it out on the fly or start making that a known fact that they need to document their process. So these are the kind of things we're thinking about when it comes to emulating capabilities and just some stuff to keep in the top of your mind as you're going through this process. Now let's get a little specific and talk about emulating TTPs when it comes to APT33. I had talked about the Microsoft report a little earlier, so I wanted to really deep dive on something that was unique and stood out to me. And it's actually been kind of hard to find other reporting about this specific piece, was the highlight on that tickler malware variant that they've been known to use. What's really cool is this was a fully fledged, it's a custom multi-stage backdoor. The payload comes in a very interesting format. They're actually like wrapping all of this up into a basic zip file. This is like networksecurity.zip. When the user unzips it, it looks like a bunch of benign stuff. It looks like some PDFs talking about policies and procedure guides, network infrastructure best practices, stuff like that. But they've hid one cool little binary in there, that network infrastructure security guide, dated whatever, PDF.exe. So depending on the user, they might see that and just double click it and kick it off, thinking, oh, I want to read that PDF. I know you guys have all seen it before, especially on your normal Windows endpoints. A lot of the times you have to physically like hit that nice little checkbox in Explorer to say show file extensions. If that's not checked, what the user sees is network infrastructure security guide.pdf. They don't see that tagged on extra extension, so they run it, that executable kicks off. Well, what it's doing in the background is it's calling up one of the PDFs that came along with it as a benign object. There's nothing crazy about the PDF. It just pops up kind of as a distraction. But in the back end, that actual payload now is doing a bunch of other stuff. It's executing some reconnaissance. It's doing a little bit of looking for stuff. It's setting persistence and overall compromising your endpoint. Meanwhile, you're thinking you're just reading a couple new cool PDFs about network infrastructure security. So that was extremely interesting to me in how they were using the duplicate file extensions, decoy files, and overall using that to gain persistence and a foothold on these victim endpoints. Now, these were being delivered several different ways. I've seen some reporting saying they were being delivered from a specific watering hole, others saying primarily they were coming out of a phishing campaign that was being sent out, whether that was directly through email or over social media, passing out information. So there was a lot going on here. And on the right, you can see I've got a quick breakdown. I pulled a snippet out of the Microsoft article for you just so you can see what all we were talking about here. The really interesting one is they very quickly iterated on Tickler. They made a new variant of it as a DLL called Sold. Now, Sold did all of the same standard stuff that happened in Tickler, with the added set of it brought along a couple other valid DLL files with it. What they believed was happening there was they were using those to DLL sideload its payload and other things into it. So they were common valid DLLs that are seen brought in with things like SharePoint and other valid Microsoft applications. The last piece of it that was a kind of a primary main variant of sold from Tickler was how it was setting persistence through a batch file. As sold executes, does the normal decoy, brings all the stuff in, pulls down the payloads from C2, it pulls in a batch file. That batch file then runs and sets a run key for persistence. I can see here I have on the bottom left of the screen. And it's calling it SharePoint exe. And overall, it's kind of blending in. Like if you saw this run key in there somewhere and you're a Microsoft shop, you're working as a normal organization, you're not going to think much of that, right? It kind of blends in. But what that's doing is it's going to kick run and it adds their persistence onto the endpoint so that they get a callback if anything were to happen. All in all, I thought it was kind of pretty ingenious and a unique way of how they were chaining multiple behaviors together and piling it all into one payload. I thought it was a cool TTP to highlight. Some of the other stuff we've seen them doing and other behaviors that have been noted across multiple reporting styles is their access and ways of acquiring credentials. They're doing a lot of the tried and true methods, utilizing common tools like Mimikatz. They've been known to use tools like Lasagna to pull them out of your password stores, out of your browsers, places like that. They're doing a lot of lateral movement over the just tried and true methods like utilizing SMB and file shares, passing things along. They're passing payloads and talking to other endpoints in your environment that way. And overall, they're being very low key outside of this one main TTP being their custom multi-stage backdoor. So I thought it was worth taking a few minutes to talk and highlight it. Did anybody have any questions over that? I know that was kind of like a water hose of what Tickler and Sold are and how they work. The cool thing is if you run our threat in your lab environment here towards the end of the next lab, you'll get to kind of see how this whole works. I emulated this implant doing its thing in there for you, so you kind of get a cool idea of how that's broken down. Questions, comments? Did anybody else see anything rather unique like this in the reporting they looked at? So me looking at this as a person performing threat emulation, running PTEs and building out overall campaigns for people, I see this and immediately I got giddy because this is really cool. It's something I know a lot of people don't see nor really train against or train their users to see. So I thought this was going to be something awesome to turn around and emulate. And it works really well. It's got some gotchas in there. Okay. Well, if no questions or comments, we will move on. Okay, so for the registry key related to SharePoint.exe, what would make it look off? See, that's a really interesting one. A lot of it would be the way the registry value was set, in understanding the way your admins and your personnel as a whole operate. So the behavior of your personnel comes into play here. Do you typically set run keys for things like this that you want to kick off a job, or are you using something else like SCCM or Intune to manage all of your updates and running of things? Do you typically have SharePoint in your environment? Maybe you're on Microsoft, but you're not actually using SharePoint for anything. You could be like a Jira Confluence shop, something like that. So that could make it potentially stick out in your environment. Those are kind of the simple things you would look for. Otherwise, this really doesn't stand out at all. Maybe the actual, like the way the file or the registry key was added would stick out to you, but otherwise, it's pretty much a benign process. Like there's a
Yeah,
lot of things.
I'd say what you would look for in that too is when you're hunting for how that was set, like you were saying, Trey, you want to look at the image that set that. So this run key, which you should be probably monitoring anyway, this run key would have been set by the PDF itself. So seeing an image, like seeing PowerShell spawning from a PDF, which then set this registry value, that would be something to take a look at. Another one is SharePoint.exe shouldn't be on a host system. SharePoint is hosted on servers, right? So there wouldn't be any need for you to have a SharePoint.exe. It seems normal because you use SharePoint all the time, but SharePoint isn't hosted on your endpoint. So SharePoint.exe shouldn't exist really on anything that you probably even have, unless you're running a SharePoint server in-house.
Exactly. So that's like a lot of really good points there. Question from John was, is the PDF set to execute the exe or the exe needs to be executed by that person's and a standalone? So what's actually happening for everything to go, that initial executable has to be clicked by the user. So that's why they're using that duplicate file extension. Typically, extensions are hidden for users to see and explore. So they just run it, think they're opening a PDF, and then it throws the decoy PDF at you while the actual implant is doing all of the other stuff behind the scenes. That's what's going on there. So yeah, it does require the user's interaction to initially kick off that chain. That makes sense, John? Cool. Yeah, great questions, guys. Thanks for the interaction. We love it. It makes this so much easier to run virtual webinars and workshops. And a lot of times we're just staring into that, webcam void, and we're not really sure if you guys are in it, if you guys are enjoying it, what you're doing, if you're getting anything from it. Makes it a little hard for us. So thank you for the interaction. So cool. Moving on. So we've talked about a little bit of everything so far up to this point, who APT33 is, some of their cool behaviors. You've gathered some threat intelligence. Now you've got a plan. How do you put it together? Well, you got to develop your capabilities, and there's some options we have here. First one being starting simple and growing complexity as you go. A lot of organizations get really hung up thinking, oh man, I need to go get a couple licenses at Cobalt Strike and Nighthawk. I need to do some dev. I need to do all of these other different things. No, you don't. 9 times out of 10, a lot of the behaviors we're seeing from what are, I'll do air quotes, modern threat actors, it's still all tried and true, living off the land stuff. They might use some kind of custom payload for initial execution or a 0 day, something like that to find their way in. But everything else after that, they can only use realistically what you give them or what they can bring into the environment and not get caught. So they're going to follow very simple procedures. They're going to use PowerShell. They're going to use what's available to them in your endpoints themselves. So as an example, we've got one here from a report from for Alpha V from a while back, where they're just running a lot of stuff locally to that endpoint. They're using ARP, task list, netstat, doing enumeration that way, utilizing all of the tools and applications that are already provided for them. If something's there, why would they waste the time, effort, and money to develop something custom, right? That's going to stick out. There's a chance that might get flagged by AV and EDR. Whereas you using like Steven said, using LawBass, it's really hard for you to discern if it was a malicious run of ARP-A or if it was just a user troubleshooting why they weren't getting to Google. It makes it really difficult, right? So start simple. All you realistically need, an endpoint, PowerShell, and a keyboard, and you can get going with generating threat signal. You do not have to be an APT and do these crazy actions overnight. But we're giving you the tools in this workshop to emulate one if you wanted to. You can keep it simple like this, or you could go in and do like I was doing and generating full-on new binaries that are running through your campaign. And I'll talk to you guys about that here in a little bit. Tyler, do you have anything you wanted to add here?
Do me on the spot.
Yeah, I did it on
No, I
purpose.
don't think so.
Yeah, and it's simple. And he'll tell you too, a lot of the times when he's doing his threat hunting and looking at this stuff, it still sticks out, especially if you understand the behaviors in your organization and how your users typically operate. So moving on. Well, what if I want to do it myself? So we're all caught up in this new AI GPT craze today, right? It's being put into everything. It's getting pushed into your socks. It's pushed into all your SaaS applications. If you're a Microsoft or O365 shop, I'm sure you're getting Copilot pushed on you permanently now, regardless if you want it or not. So these tools are all out there and they can be very helpful. I thought it would be really cool to introduce kind of a small little section into this workshop for you guys just to show how I was utilizing it. So by trade, I'm not a developer. I don't have any formal training or background in creating things like this, but I've got a little bit of time, know-how, and I really understand how to prompt a large language model or a GPT to ask it to do something for me. So this was a really interesting way for me to know, as a person building threats and building campaigns, to augment my capabilities. I understand how these actors work. I understand how to utilize what's there in the environment with me and some of the common tools and frameworks. But now I've all of a sudden got this really cool new power that I can wield, which is building my own stuff, which makes it way more fun. And it allows me to follow more down that path of emulation, right? I'm not just kind of making it fit. I can now get a lot more accurate, a lot more realistic to what you would see from that actor and that thread signal as a whole. So on this slide here, what I've got for you is just kind of showing you a way that you can kind of take your experience and knowledge and that capability of this GPT to build out some pretty cool payloads for you. I've got a prompt here, and this is kind of what we found as a best case to kind of make it work when you're trying to build things like this. I personally like using Claude. I play with some local models on my own to help me build some stuff out, depending on what you're trying to do. If I'm being more creative, writing, design, things like that, something like ChatGPT tends to be a little more favorable for me. If I'm trying to do more kind of like dev heavy work or working with code, I've found Claude is one of the best to help. And so in this prompt here, I've highlighted a couple different things. I called it Griot, that my system prompting. I've got a whole thing in the background to explain how I want it to give me information, how I want it to act, think, all of that fun stuff. I called it Griot. I like the name. But I asked it specifically, like, hey, I need to build out a 64-bit C or C++ portable executable that has several different functions. Now I'm trying to mimic what we saw from Tickler and Sold, right? I tell it, and we found for some reason this works perfectly, and we've heard it from several other talks me and Tyler attended, that if you ask it to think through or reason through the problem step by step, think programmatically as it tries to solve it, you tend to get better results. There's some other weird little quirks too we've seen. Like if you tell it it's a sunny day on it's a first Tuesday and a sunny day in October, the best day to do a thing, all of a sudden its reasoning is a little better. It's more consistent, stuff like that. So we give it a little bit of flavor text that way. I tell it I want it to think step by step. First, here's what I want you to do. I want to check the computer monitor size. So maybe I'm emulating, looking to see if I'm in a sandbox or a VM. Because usually, like sandboxes, there's no monitor attached, right? So if there's no monitor size, kind of sandbox, I might have a problem. We've seen a lot of modern implants turn themselves off or try not to do anything if they run into that kind of a setting. Next, I asked it to open a specific PDF file, wanted it to wait 60 seconds after that before doing the next thing. Then lastly, I asked it to execute a DLL file that I'll specify, and I want this to work in that order. I also wanted it to go ahead and in the code put a couple variables for me in place to where I can add in my own information. The last thing I would note here is I asked it for every step it did, I wanted a brief explanation of the reasoning for why it chose to do it that way within the code, and then summarize it all at the end. Now, what I would say is I don't use it like just trust and run with it. This is kind of a multi-step iterative process for me. I'm going to turn around and fact check this. I might throw it against another LLM, be like, hey, what do you think this code is doing? Or I've got some friends that work in engineering, they do dev work, things like that. I have them do a quick look over, see if they see anything that's weird, sticks out of place, or that might break and not do what I want it to, and kind of do a checks and balance. Now I can do a bit of dev work without me actually being a dev when I'm trying to build out some stuff for threats. Is anybody doing anything similar? I thought this was kind of a pretty cool concept to talk through for a minute. Okay, so what does this end up looking like? You've seen what the prompt was, what I was trying to do here. We have a general idea of what we're trying to build. Let's see what it came up with. So here's what that ended up looking like from a build out perspective. You can see in here, it'll say, hey, here's what I'll make, here's what we're doing, and here's how I'm going to do it. It gave me a quick breakdown of what APIs and functions it was going to call, how it was going to set it all up, and then lastly, it gave me that reasoning for each step down there at the end. What's really nice of using something like Claude like this is it'll tell you about it, but it'll also build it out as a separate document for you that you can copy and paste out or pull directly. And that's what you're seeing over here on the right. From there, bring it into something like VS Code. validate it, make sure it's good, add any changes I need. Maybe I want to set some specific variables or I want to hard code a file name, something like that. And then compile and run and give it a test. It's literally that simple sometimes to build out these payloads and binaries. Now, mind you, I've had some times once or twice where I banged my head against a random function for like 2 days, but that again comes not necessarily from an issue with how we were doing it, but from my own ignorance, right? So you got to weigh it out and kind of understand what you're going for here. But the coolest part about this is I learned along the process, and now I kind of have an idea of what this would typically look like and what's going on if I see these API calls or I see these functions in other binaries that I'm trying to replicate moving forward. Always be learning, people. Now, if that sounds too difficult, you guys have already had a chance to play with Scythe, right? You've kind of seen how quick and easy it was for you to put some behaviors into an attack sequence, hit go, pull down a payload, and execute, right? Maybe you don't have the time and expertise and ability to go the whole red team route and dev your own stuff and have someone dedicated to doing that full time. Maybe you're just working on the blue side or in a SOC or you're in a mixed seat and you just need to generate some threat signal and do it quickly. That's where Scythe comes in. You can utilize our whole threat catalog. You can utilize the capabilities we've built in for you into the platform to generate that threat signal quickly and make it overall easier and more beneficial for you and your organization. There's tons of pre-existing threats. We've got well over 100 different threat articles for you guys to utilize in these campaigns. We've got a bunch of modules that generate that demand signal and the capabilities you see from all the major C2 frameworks and tools and other things out there. Like Mimikatz, there's our own custom role version. We interact with things like beacon object files. And there's a lot of custom stuff built in here for you as well. You can use unmanaged PowerShell, pretty much anything and everything you can think of. It can interact with the cloud. Overall, it's a really cool and interesting platform that can help you quickly pull this capability into your organization and allow you to perform these assessments. So, very long-winded way to tell you how to be the threat. What we're going to do now is we'll go into the lab. This time here's kind of arbitrary. This next piece is kind of the biggest part of this workshop. Within your lab manual, you will see this section called Executing Our Plan. We're going to run through this whole thing here. These sections, what we're going to kind of do is give you a quick overview of what's going on. We'll show you one more time again how to generate a quick custom campaign if you just wanted a quick summarization of it. If this is too kind of narrow for you and you want to read a little bit more on the different modules and abilities, I would recommend going back and checking out that Scythe familiarization page in the beginning. These following 3 sections here, we break down some common ways that you can emulate utilizing Scythe. External tool usage, one of the key behaviors I wanted to highlight as well from APT33 was they were doing some instance, some namespace enumeration. So we wanted to highlight that as well and let you guys see how to do that from Scythe using run and upshell. And then lastly, that custom tickler malware. We don't have enough time today for you guys all to generate your own version of it. So we've included a copy of it within Scythe in the VFS for you to utilize. You can bring it into your campaign, kick it off and run, and see how that behavior looks. From there, you'll get a chance to kind of do some independent practice, play with the different modules, play with these behaviors, and generate your own campaign from that threat intel that you guys gathered. Do you guys have any questions up to this point before we kick you guys back to lab time? Yep, that's actually a great point there, Veronica. Yeah, make sure you're changing them from those defaults. And that it comes down to how direct are you trying to replicate what they were doing? If the threat actors specifically are making changes or it's something unique to their implants or payloads, if it's within your wheelhouse to emulate that, for sure, please go ahead and do so. All right. Well, if you guys don't have any other questions or comments for this section of threat emulation, we'll let you guys get to it. It is 2:45. I'll check back in with you guys around 3 o'clock to see if you have any other questions or concerns. And based on how you guys are doing, we might put a little more time on the clock. More than likely we will. So we might run this overall lab section probably to around 3:15 Eastern. with that, me, Tyler, Jared will be around. If you guys have any problems or questions or issues as you're going through the lab, just let us know. Okay. So it was about 15 minutes in. How's everybody doing so far? Anybody running into any issues? You guys all just enjoying the workshop as a whole, too busy playing in the platform to bother with us. All right, cool. So what I'll do real quick is do a quick walkthrough and kind of just show you guys how you could utilize pre-created threat campaigns within the platform. If going through this whole process is a little time consuming for you, or maybe you're just not about going through the whole thing, you just wanted to get the information, we'll show you how to go ahead and run our APT33 threat campaign so that you can go in during the next section for threat hunting and see some of that signal and hunt for behaviors. So what you're going to want to do from within Scythe as a whole on that campaigns page, if you hit this big blue button for create a campaign, these steps are very similar to before. There's nothing too crazy about it. So give it a name. I'm going to call this APT33 test. We'll leave description blank. We can leave all of the other settings here default by now if you want. For those of you that are kind of interested in how the platform works and the C2 and its capabilities, within here, if you hit that customizations drop down, you have a lot more options for things like putting guardrails in place for where the implant can execute, controlling the malleable C2, so like what your traffic actually looks like, where it's going, if you're using any kind of proxies or redirectors, stuff like that, or even just like how often it checks back in, so controlling the heartbeat and its jitter. You can manage all of that from in here. For the sake of the lab, we're going to kind of leave it all vanilla. We'll hit next. So Tyler walked you through using the atomics, the atomic matrix. You can use some pre-built behaviors from there. He kind of showed you how to load some modules and issue some steps. The other piece we have here is we can hit this button called Add Existing Threats. If you click that, it'll give you a quick Rolodex of all of the threats we have in that library for you guys to utilize. The one we're going to use for this workshop to generate our threat signal, unless you decide to use your own, you can use ours as well, which is going to be this APT33 2025 update. This should also be specified in your lab manual. When you click on this one, hit add steps. It'll populate that attack sequence for you with everything preloaded, tagged, all that fun stuff. So just a quick run through of this. We can see in here in this attack kill chain, it starts off doing some basic quick enumeration. It checks the integrity level of the process. It tries to do a quick print screen, runs some living off the lane commands like who am I, checks the clipboard, and kicks off a keylogger from within the C2. It'll do a bit of a delay, and just for the sake of the signal, it's going to do a quick check on that keylogger to see if anything new came through, run a few more commands, and then it'll change up its process and start doing some staging of files. We're starting to move over our implants, like the tickler and sold DLL, along with some other common tooling like AnyDesk and AD Explorer, stuff like that. It'll create the directories it needs. If they don't already exist on that endpoint, it's going to drop that folder on the disk. For the sake of the simulation, it diverges a little bit from the CTI. We just called it peaches.zip. That way it was very identifiable in the signal. From there, it'll turn around and give you a quick breakdown. What's in the documents folder? It'll do some of the next stage reconnaissance. So like checking out what kind of security tooling's in place on the endpoint via those SIM namespaces. It's going to get some DNS information, some shared drive or just locally attached drive informations. And then like we talked about earlier for credential access and acquisition, it's going to try Mimikatz to see what it can get a hold of. It dives a little bit deeper. It starts running lasagna, see what information it can find, throws it all into a text file, and then we utilize Upshell, which is our unmanaged PowerShell module, to take all that information, roll it up into an archive, and then we use Uploader, which is our module used for kind of moving data out of the victim endpoint to send those results back. So Davis, UPSH is the abbreviation for the module, which is unmanaged PowerShell. So basically what we're doing here is we're calling all of the features, functionality, the namespaces of PowerShell itself without ever directly calling PowerShell exe on the endpoint. So it's a little more sneaky, a little stealthy. So if you've got people that are directly watching for like execution of PowerShell.exe space/c whatever, this way they won't see that. It forces you to kind of have to pay attention to stateful changes in the environment as opposed to like keyword hunting. By using unmanaged PowerShell, we're avoiding that whole buildup of the PowerShell process itself. You're not getting any of those traditional indicators. The cool part about this too is it does a lot more of that capability from within memory instead of like actually dropping something to disk. Answer your question, Davis? Cool. So it rolls that data back up. Then from there, it goes into some of the newer behaviors. Primarily, this is focusing on it pulling in that PDF. I highlighted the names here on purpose. They are not a one-for-one match from the CTI because we wanted it to be a little more visible on the thread signal when they've seen these run. And as we all know, trying to do like direct hunts on keywords, names, things like that, hashes, they change very easily. So there's not a ton of kind of meat on the bone for us to leave it all exactly the same unless we really want to test that. So as the user, if you wanted to, you can change this name to be whatever you want in these steps. We can do that by hitting edit, come in here and switch this to coolstuff.pdf.exe. Now, the trick here is if you change it in one step, you have to make sure that the prior steps actually put it in place as that name. But it's really easy to manage and handle from within the Scythe platform. And then it rounds up with some of the lateral movement behaviors. It tries to take a snapshot using AD Explorer. It's going to utilize netuse to kind of do some drive movement and stuff. And then it runs through our cleanup steps. In our threads, we typically always include steps that will remove any kind of changes we made to the environment, tools we brought in, stuff like that. So now that we've got our threat loaded, we kind of did a quick rundown. We understand what it's doing. This is the signal we want to generate. We'll hit that blue create campaign button. Now we can see I've got a new one here. I'm going to go ahead and select this and give it a run. We'll just go with the exe this time. Why not? Now I need to allow this. Cool. So now I should have a nice shiny new executable in my Explorer. And I'm gonna just go ahead and give this a run. Why not? We should see our, yep, expected that, run anyway. I promise it's fine. We'll see our pending change to active. There we go. And now you could take a minute, go grab a snack, grab a drink, whatever you need to do, or you can wait and watch it as it goes through. But now, since we have that step set and run, it's going to go through that entire attack campaign for us. Yes. So that is a key to all of those campaigns, like you had said, Davis. Here, I can click in and show you. For us to be able to utilize those modules or capabilities in the campaign, you first have to load them. If you don't, they won't be accessible to the actual implant itself. Yeah, just wanted to kind of give you guys a quick rundown of what that looks like real quick, how our campaign is, and see from the CTI you guys were looking at and gathering, or maybe some of the steps you were creating, did our threat kind of mimic what you're making? Is there anything you guys were including maybe we didn't? Or are you guys still kind of just in the whole build process and wanting me to shut up and let you guys go play some more? Cool. I'm going to assume they're all still having fun. So what we'll do, we'll let this one run through, and then we'll say, let's go another 10 minutes or so in this section of the lab. Then we'll kick off the last quick little period of slides. It's just a few, and then you guys can use the remainder of the time in the lab to do whatever you feel like within the environment, continue running threats, just having fun. So yeah, we'll probably check in at right around 20 after. Um, you mean, so Steven, you're asking if it was automatically loaded to SAS instances? There hasn't been an update pushed since we released this one, so I don't think you have it yet, but it is in the knowledge base for you to pull down. Or I believe they're doing another update push to the SaaS platforms here in the next day or two, so you might get it anyway. But yeah, it's up in the knowledge base.
Trey, I don't know if you're talking to us, but if you are, you're on mute.
Happens at least once every
Oh,
call.
okay. I was like, you're really getting into whatever you're saying.
Yep. So what I was saying 3 minutes ago or so, uh, did anybody run into any issues in this section of the lab? So as a quick summarization of it, you guys should have got a chance to take that CTI you guys have curated, turn it into something actionable. We walked you through how to do some pretty cool or unique behaviors utilizing Scythe in our built-in modules and payloads. And from there, you got a bit of independent practice taking and running the stuff you made into a threat campaign, as well as a chance to run one of our custom created ones that we provide in the platform. Did anybody have any issues or anything specific they wanted to talk about, ask questions, concerns with that?
Say with that, also, you guys should have access to the labs until 4 Eastern, so about another almost 2 hours or so. We're just trying to keep the slides and everything down to the 3 hour time window. So even after we're done with the slides and everything, you guys will still have access to the lab for about another hour and 40 minutes if you want to go back in and test some additional things or try to do some other techniques.
He meant 5 Eastern, not 4.
Yep, 4 Central, that's where I am. My
Yep.
bad.
All right. Well, if you guys don't have any kind of questions or comments or anything to discuss from that section, we'll move on to the last chunk. We'll let Tyler talk to you guys real quick about some detection engineering, looking for cool behaviors, and then give you a chance to hunt for them yourself. All right. So, detections.
For sure. One sec, just to get me set up. So, like you go to the next slide. So like Trey's saying, we're going to do this last part of just going over some detections. Some people don't like to hear this, but the whole point of doing purple team exercises or doing offensive security is to improve your defenses, right? So we thought we would just round it out with that. So for those that might not be aware or might not be blue teamers or having done any kind of threat hunting or detection engineering before, we are primarily, well, not primarily, we're going to completely hunt for this activity inside of a SIEM. The SIEM of choice we're going to be using is Splunk. You guys more than likely have a SIEM in your environment, whether it's Splunk or Elastic, Sentinel, things like that. They all pretty much work the same. We just have Splunk in our lab. So to detect adversary behavior, like I said, we strongly recommend for your defenders to utilize a SIEM and have all of your pertinent logs and enrichment and ingestion done by a SIEM. A SIEM will provide you with a centralized location to hunt across your environment, right? You can also configure your SIEM to do some automated alerting or perform certain actions based off of the alert that it gets, right? The example that we like to kind of talk about for this is that if you use a SIEM, you'll never forget to buy milk. And what we mean by that is, let's say in this made up world with all of our smart fridges and everything else, you have a fridge.log that you monitor all the time, right? Your fridge.log will monitor what the milk level is in your fridge. If it sees in your log that your milk level is getting low, you can have it automated to set up maybe something through DoorDash, where now it'll put an order in for DoorDash, send it out there, and then now you'll always have milk, right? But more of from a defensive side of it is maybe you're monitoring for a bulk amount of failed logons and then one successful logon, right? So maybe find some brute force, or maybe you're monitoring for if someone runs who am I via the command prompt or something like that. You know, it seems pretty innocuous, but the only people that run who am I are adversaries and admins, right? There's really nobody else, no normal user is going on and running who am I. So like to just say that you want to utilize a SIEM because it gives you that centralized view, so you're able to see everything in one spot, right? If you don't have a SIEM, you're not ingesting your logs into your SIEM. You're going to have to go on each of those endpoints and hunt through the event logs for each of those endpoints individually, which is just not scalable across an enterprise, right? If you have thousands of machines, or even excuse me, even a few dozen machines in your environment, going to each of them and threat hunting through them through the event log viewer or something like that is takes a very long time. And if an adversary clears the event logs, then when you go to that box, you're not going to have them anyway, right? So you want to make sure that you're getting them up into a seam. You can do your alerting, like I said, you can do your correlations, your enrichment, everything like that. Yeah, just a little precursor into what we're going to be doing. We're not going to talk about it too much. Next up, so here we have a sample Splunk query. We go into this in a lot more detail inside of the lab environment, especially in that Splunk familiarization that was up there near the top. It goes a lot more into detail of how to craft a query and things like that. But just as an overview, in this query, we're looking for, or excuse me, let me back up. Essentially, what you want to do when you're creating a query is you want to match the field to a value. And what I mean by that, I think it's easiest to see in the example of the query that we have here. So we're looking in event code 1 for some command line arguments and for some images, right? So the field that we're looking in is event code or command line or image, and then the value is what we have over there on the right. So the value of 1, which in sysmon is process creation, the value of ping. So we're looking for ping inside of the command line arguments, and we're looking for ping to not be a part of the image. That's what that exclamation point equal sign means. So we're essentially looking for process creation that's calling ping in the command line that is spawned by something that isn't ping. We can see in the results that we have PowerShell and Edge. That is, Edge is for some reason has ping in it. I'm sure it's probably just a random order that is inside of that chunk. But that's what we're looking for, right? We're just matching the value to the field or the field to the values. Yeah, we see some other things in this result that's interesting. So the first two we see that parent image is a SVC host. So SVC host is typically a child process of services.exe. So that could be probably pretty indicative that there is a service that's created that then spawns PowerShell that then runs that ping command that's reaching out to the local host. You need to do some more investigation into that, maybe see what the grandparent process is, but I would bet it's probably services.exe. And then below that, we see that the Edge update is calling Edge update that then has all that looks like base 64 encoded command strings. That's probably a false positive, but it'll take a little more investigation to kind of figure out exactly what's going on there. But that, in a quick little 2 minutes, is how you craft a Splunk query, the field that you're looking in, and then the value of what you're looking for inside of that, right? We call that keyword searches is what we're kind of looking at here. Does that make sense to everyone? Again, there's a lot more information about it in the manual itself. Just want to do a quick couple minute like rundown of how it works.
Now, this one, the hunt section here, guys, just for your information, is going to be kind of like an inch deep, a mile wide when we talk to it in the slides. If this is more up your alley and you want more information on our threat hunting process, how we utilize Splunk, things like that, we do have several different workshops that cover this, namely our hunting through the seam workshop, and then we also have a whole other workshop on Sigma as well.
Which, speaking of Sigma, next slide. Yeah, like Trey said, we've distilled all this down into 1 or 2 slides. Each of these are 3-hour workshops in and of itself. So if you are more interested in it, we do them every couple of months. Yeah, would look forward to seeing you guys there. But onto that. So showed you how you kind of make a quick query inside of Splunk. There's also, you don't have to make the queries all on your own. Kickstarter is what I like to call it, but Sigma is a fantastic resource to kind of kickstart you threat hunting for something, right? Sigma will allow you to take a detection that's already written in a standard format. It's written in YAML, and then you can quickly convert it to the query language that you hunt with. It essentially works just like this image here. You have the rule, you put it in a converter, and essentially any tool that has a like a query bar where you can type in queries, it'll translate it into that. So you see Rapid7, Splunk, Elastic, Defender, Sentinel, all kinds of stuff. CrowdStrike over there. It's great because it is an open source structured format that is used for writing detections. They have a few thousand rules that they host on Sigma HQ. I have the link on the slide over there. They're the creators and maintainers of the Sigma project. You guys will get more into looking at Sigma rules and translating them in the lab. But for this example, we go to the next slide. So in this example, you go to Sigma HQ. You either click around or you search for a detection related to, in this example, 7-zip, right? So we have a rule that we found that's titled compress data and lock with password for exfiltration via 7-zip. And if you look more closely at that detection logic down there towards the bottom, you can see that the rule is looking for, excuse me, command line arguments, image descriptions, original file names that are all related to 7-zip and creating a password protected archive. Again, the thing that I like about using Sigma as the Kickstarter is that the detection logic is fairly simple to read. You see this like it's looking for the image, looking for the file name, it's looking for some command line arguments, and then you see the condition underneath. So it says all of selection, so it needs to fit all of those things above, right? And you don't have to write it yourself. Someone has already created this. So you just have to go and find it and translate it. But once you have it, you copy that rule. Next slide. You go over to a converter. Sig converter is the official converter that they have. Uncoder.io is also one that a lot of people utilize. But you paste your rule on the left. You select your backend, which is your seam. For us, our seam is Splunk. You can also feed it into the pipeline that it has there. So we know that in our lab we utilize Sysmon. So for pipeline, you could choose Sysmon or Security Log or any other different pipelines that they have there. But as soon as you fill those out and paste the rule, it will auto translate it on the right. So we've taken our rule that's written in YAML. Now it's a Splunk query. We can copy the query and go to the next slide. And then we take that query, we paste it in Splunk that we have there, and we already have we are able to see that this activity has taken place in our environment. We didn't have to write a rule. We just had to go and kind of curate one. Might have to tweak it a little bit. Nothing. Everyone's environment is very different. There is a standard way that you're supposed to stand up your SIEM environment, but called the CIM. But a lot of people don't really go by that, so you might have to tweak it a little bit for your field names and things like that. Also, Sigma does not know what your index or your sources are called because you can call them whatever you want in your environment. In our lab, we put everything inside a main, which is not what you do in a production environment. But so you will need to put those in and maybe do the table or stats commands or something like that at the end to kind of visualize it in the way that you want to see it. But Sigma really does make it just as simple as that, right? You know what you're looking for. You go to Sigma HQ. To their GitHub page, you go to like detection.fyi, which gives you a more user-friendly way to view those. And then you can translate it, and then you're off to hunting for, what this activity is. Before we go to the next one, has anyone used Sigma before, or has anyone used it before or contribute to the Sigma project? I'm a very big fan of Sigma rules. I think it's just a fantastic resource. Okay, some people using it. Okay. Like I said, if you're not using it and you are in the detection or blue space, could not recommend it enough. It's really fantastic. And then next slide. And then we had already talked about this. This is as deep as we're going to get into detections. We really had to prune this part of the slides down because we could just talk all day about it. But the one that I did want to point out is to kind of be weary of keyword-based detections. So we see on the right is what our attacker has done, right? I just ran it in PowerShell, but you could, make believe that that's your C2 shell, right? So what we're trying to do as the attacker is ascertain who we are, right? To do that, we echo the environment variables of user domain and username, and then we also run who am I. And then you can see on the left, we're just looking for who am I via some keyword detections, right? We just put asterisks on either side, so that's the same as having like a wildcard. But we're just looking for the word who am I in our environment. So with that, obviously the only thing that we see is the attacker running who am I. If they didn't run who am I and they just ran that echo command of those variables, you wouldn't be able to see that. You'd have no idea that that's what they did to ascertain who they were at that point in time. So this gets into state-based detections and some other things that we're not going to talk about. But the point of this is just because you ran one query and you don't see who am I or whatever it is like that, it doesn't necessarily mean that you should stop there because are a ton of other ways that they could find that information, right? So just something that we like to point out, just to be wary of keyword-based detections. You really want to focus on state-based detections. If you want to know more about that, you can hit me up and I'll talk to you until you don't want to talk about it anymore, or come to our hunting through the seam workshop. We get really deep into it. All right. And then next slide. And that will take us into our lab. So like I said, not going to get super into detections. It's not really the point of this workshop. We just like to include it at the end because it is the reason why you do offensive security, is to enhance your defensive posture, right? So in this will basically, I mean, this will run us all the way through to the end. It's just going to have you hunting for some procedures and activities inside of Splunk, and just have you kind of hunting through the seam. I think we could probably go to the next slide too, Trey. Just kind of wrap it all up. So we still have 26 minutes or so left in the lab that Trey and Jared and I are going to hang on for. You guys will have the lab for an additional hour past that after we drop off. But if you guys have anything, you got to do in the meantime, or anybody has to drop off, just wanted to say thank you for attending. Hopefully you guys got some out of it and had a good time. We do workshops every month. And then, yeah, if you guys have any questions or anything like that, proserve@scythe.io is the email to all of us. So yeah, just thanks again for attending.
Yep, and as Tyler said, you guys have still got probably about an hour and 20 minutes of lab time you can utilize. We'll hang on here for another 20 or so. In the last few minutes, leading right up to around 1600 Eastern, I'll do a quick spin of the wheel. We'll get a raffle going, and one of you guys will win a nice little gift card to our Scythe swag shop. The cool part about the swag shop, whether or not you win the gift card or not, is it all goes to support a nonprofit for Save and Chubby Unicorns, aka rhinos. So stick around for that. Thanks for the great participation today, guys. It made it a lot more interesting.
And we'll still be on for the next 25 minutes or so. So just like before, if anything comes up, please just let us know. And I see a question from Jeffrey. Great to see you again. It's always nice to know that you're on the other side. Long time listener, first time commenter. How often should security teams do these simulation attacks? I say as often as possible, right? We talk about this a lot in the hunting through the seam workshop, but it's, the more you do this and you can iteratively go through deploying these emulations, seeing what you're able to see from the defensive side, seeing what you can't see, and then you can kind of come together, red team and blue team, be like, this is what we saw, this is what we didn't see, and then you can adjust your defensive posture, maybe your rules, maybe get some more tooling or things like that. So then now you are able to identify those. And once you've kind of closed the loop on that, you are able to see everything that was performed by the offensive team, by the simulation, by the emulation. Once you're able to see all of that, then you can tell your red team or your offensive signal drivers, hey, we're good. We see all of this stuff. Now let's tweak it a little bit, make it a little bit different, and see if we're able to identify it now that you run things a different way. Kind of in the same vein of that keyword detections, how adversaries can run things in multiple different ways. Once you close a loop and are able to see everything from the emulation, then you probably want to change it up a little bit and see if you can see other ways that they might do it. Um, so I say run it as often as you possibly can. Um, so I think, and it doesn't always take a huge team. Like we've done purple team engagements with just the three of us, and then maybe three people on the other side. It doesn't have to be a whole big project, a whole big thing. You can do it with just a few people that are really interested and that just really care a lot. All right, so see that Alfredo, no problem if you shoot over your email to Jared, we'll get you a link to the workshop. You still are going to have like an hour and 20 minutes left of it, so that should be enough time for you to go through, some decent chunks of it. Um, our our platform is called Scythe, and down to Jeffrey Rodriguez with the APT profile, CTI often stay constant or become obsolete. Like I said, I think that from what we've seen, the TTPs of threat actors typically stay the same, right? Each threat actor is their purpose or their objective normally stays the same. Like if they are after, if they're like a ransomware group, they're always going to do ransomware. If they're trying to steal IP or deface or destroy or whatever like that, those are all going to stay kind of the same. And it's going to most of the time it will follow a similar kill chain, right? They get on the box probably through phishing or a watering hole, something like that. They'll do living off the land, living off the land enumeration, lateral movement via some kind of means, defense evasion, probably disabling some services, running some stuff like that, and then finally get to their impact on objective down there at the end. What we see change more often is the exact procedures that they're running and the tools that are being utilized. Um, but again, because CTI is historic, you're not always going to get that as quickly as they're changing it. So that's kind of akin to what I was saying before. It's like once you have the emulation based on your CTI, it's as closely related to the adversary as possible. Once you've kind of done that loop, you've closed that loop, you're able to see everything that's inside of that emulation. That's when you look at, okay, so an example, they want to enumerate Active Directory. Let's say initially they use living off the land, get dash AD user, get dash AD computer, et cetera, things like that. They did that initially. You were able to see all of that activity. What else could they use? APT33 uses that AD Explorer tool. So now you can pull down that tool, run it utilizing that tool, and then see what you're able to see from there. Maybe try to get it to run in memory or get it to run as a PowerShell script or obfuscate it in some way. That's how I think you would stay ahead of them. You don't know what they're going to do until they do it and it's reported, right? But outside of custom tooling that they're creating, off the shelf stuff you can research and learn, or you could Google ways to enumerate Active Directory or something like that and find other ways to do it and add that into your emulation to try to stay as on top of it as possible. So hopefully that answers your question. Um, and then Barak asks, how do you validate the detections if you don't have the same Splunk/SIEM access? You just send the report and the customer does the detection verification by itself. That is a great question and something that we run into quite a bit from people that do pen testing. So like when you do a normal pen test, that's essentially what happens, right? They do all the adversary stuff, they send you a report, and then they're out the door. We focus more on, or not more on, we focus on purple team purple team engagements, which is when we, as Scythe, Trey and Jared and myself, will deploy these emulations onto a customer's environment, and then their blue team will hunt for it while we're there. So we can see in real time what everybody is seeing and kind of guide them into what they don't see. If you don't run a purple team exercise where you're kind of sitting left seat, right seat, you have to really rely on either an integration into that tooling, which is something that we have with Scythe, shameless plug. We have integration set up for like CrowdStrike and Defender, really any kind of EDR that you have. So if our emulation procedures are detected by your EDR or tooling, it'll return back to you and you can see that without having to have access to your SIEM. But if you don't have an integration set up, you're going to have to just go and talk to someone that has access to it and be like, hey, this is what I did. Can you see it? And then kind of vice versa, where ideally the blue team would then be like, hey, we saw this activity. Is this you? Right? It's more, you have to really rely on a more collaborative kind of experience, which is why we prefer to do purple teams over like pen testing. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, it's a really hard spot to be into if you're someone like that maybe you're a managed service provider and you're hoping that it works and you don't have all the access you potentially may want or need in that customer organization. So you're kind of just kind of left with a maybe kind of answer, and that's kind of rough. So, Chris, question here was, how often are attack playbooks updated in Scythe? Do we constantly review default reports, etc., to emulate for our own out of the box simulations? So the answer there is yes. We put out new threat emulations or updates monthly. It really just comes down to the landscape of CTI as a whole, right? We know that it's partly a commodity, and a lot of the times that data takes a while to disseminate. So as something new does come out, we see something new, maybe we hear it through our reporting channels or through customers, things like that. We can add those updates to our campaigns, like this APT33 one. There was a lot of really cool reporting recently, so we took that and made a new threat from it in a workshop. But again, that relies on that information being disseminated out to everyone. If it's not out there, it's hard to do an update, right? So yeah,
Yeah,
so short
and
answer
I'd
monthly.
say too, kind of the proof of that. If you just look for 33 in the threat catalog, you'll see we have 4 different APT33 threats to show as new CTI comes out, we just try to update those threats with the new stuff that's come out. Obviously, APT33 has been in the news a lot recently, so there's been a lot more attention on it. But yeah, as the new CTI comes out, we try to keep it updated.
Yeah, another good example of that actually would be Black Suit and Royal. So we did some reporting on Royal, the ransomware group, and then kind of right there around the bend, they saw a new variant or kind of like an adjacent pop off of Black Suit happen. It was supposed to be a kind of like a spin-off from them. So we had a lot of ammunition to go ahead and build out a whole new threat emulation plan for that as well. A lot of it comes down to just what we can see and when. So for your second question there, Chris, when thinking about things like man in the middle or phishing attacks, how far would Scythe take up? So we traditionally look at Scythe as a platform. It is post breach. So a lot of that infrastructure you would expect to see for like being able to perform phishing campaigns, things like that. That's not what we're worried about. We're more of the mindset that you should assume compromise. Eventually, a user is going to click on the fish. They're going to do something, hit a watering hole, and they're going to gain access. It's not a matter of if, it's when, right? So we go through that whole piece and just assume, okay, if you want to emulate that completely, you can use our payloads, our implants, those kind of things within that infrastructure and that kind of process. We take up everything after initial execution. And Tyler actually just brought it up here on screen. It's a great example of how you can utilize the direct download links, include these in a phishing campaign, maybe load them into a macro, something like that. However you want to utilize it, that's up to you. To answer your question, Chris? Cool. Uh, Grant, what are your recommendations on defending against unmanaged PowerShell and detecting nefarious behavior as an analyst? Tyler, I'll let you take that one.
I say I'll grab that one. Uh, So as far as defending against unmanaged PowerShell, a great way to defend against people running PowerShell you don't want them to is to have standard users on like a constrained PowerShell. So it'll only allow them to run certain things or not allow them to run it at all. Um, that's yeah. So that'll essentially they will then have to switch over to a memory based PowerShell or unmanaged PowerShell, which calls the DLL. But then that brings you to another thing you can look for is processes or users targeting that system management automation DLL. If you could see that someone is targeting that or that image is loaded, then you know that someone is running PowerShell. So if you see the system automation management DLL running, and that process or that DLL or image is not called by PowerShell, then you know that someone is running PowerShell in an unmanaged fashion, whether that's Upshell that we use or PowerPick or whatever Cobalt Strike calls it. I'm not sure. Um, that's a good way to tell if someone is running PowerShell. Also, having script block logging enabled, it I think we talk about that in the manual actually about finding the get sim instance using script block logging. Excuse me. Um, that is really powerful. It will log unmanaged PowerShell and things like that. The only issue with it is that it can be very difficult to parse through because it has so much information, and every command you run will create, I think it's four different events over four different log sources. I think it's 4103, 4104, and two other ones. I don't remember what they are. Um, but so you want to be ingesting your script block logs. You just want to make sure that you're ingesting a manageable amount because it can really blow up your seam just with how much information is in there. And then detecting nefarious behavior as an analyst. The one sentence answer I would give on that is to monitor for the parent, grandparent, and child processes, right? So if you see PowerShell that's running outside you see PowerShell as a child process and its parent process or parent image is not inside of program files x86 or system32, you should investigate it, right? If you're seeing PowerShell spawn from a PDF, you're seeing PowerShell spawn from downloads directory, temp, anything like that, that needs to be investigated. That I think is the quickest way to answer that. Just look for abnormal like process process creations and child and parents and grandparents, things like that. And then Jeffrey said, is there a ranking system for APTs that a cybersecurity professional should be aware of? I would say for that, I don't think there's a ranking like overall. For I'll speak on behalf of all of us. We say you need to first see what adversary or APT or name threat actor, whatever you want to call them, what adversaries target your environment, what adversaries target your domain and are inside of your threat landscape, right? So if you have an adversary that targets the US and targets a financial industry or whatever industry you're in, wherever you're at in the world, that's what you want to be concerned with. You don't want to be concerned with an APT or named threat actor that only targets, I don't know, hospitals. If you make video games, right? That's not in your vertical. They're not going to target you because they don't care about what you have. Or a lot of nation state actors, which a lot of APTs are nation state actors, paid for and kind of directed by nation states. If you're not in a country that is targeted by these nation states, then you're probably all right. You want to see who targets you and kind of base your ranking system off of that. And then good CTI portal page. Yeah, the cyber info. I totally forgot what his name is.
InfoSec Ninja.
InfoSec Ninja. I was like, I totally just blanked. Yeah, that start.me page is a great starting point for CTI. That's what we use all the time. Fortunately, there's no like search button on the top to look for the threat actor that you're looking for, but just for up-to-date threat intelligence, it's really great.
Yeah, it's a good starting point, and it kind of gives you a heartbeat of what's going on in the world at that time. Because you'll notice a lot of the times the bigger vendors will kind of report on similar stuff in tandem, especially if it's something through like a named actor. Yeah, that's the one I just posted right above you, Chris. Yep. To touch on that ranking system question just a little more, Jeffrey, the way we like to say it is always like taking a look in the mirror. You've got to understand yourself as an organization, what market verticals you work in, the infrastructure and exposures you have. If you understand all of that, it'll make it much easier for you to prioritize and focus on specific threat actors or things like that, or even it could be activists, it could be state espionage, depending on your vertical. So you know who is more of someone to focus. The other place to look is internally. Who's hit you prior? What kind of information and incidents have you already faced and seen? That information will really help you kind of tailor what you should be focusing on and I guess ranking in a priority perspective. I wouldn't focus on someone that is historically focused on like IP theft from government contractors if you make hats. They're not going to care about your IP. They're looking for stuff on the new hotness for tanks and planes and drones and stuff like that. So it may not be as big a concern for you, right? Cool. All right, we got like 5 minutes left, so I'll go ahead and knock this out real quick. We're gonna do a quick spin of the wheel. Take a bunch of y'all's names that were asking cool questions and interacting with us. And we're gonna do a quick spin to see who's gonna get a gift card to the swag shop. Looks like it is you, Chris. Congrats. So what we're gonna do, I'm gonna shoot you a message real quick. It'll just include some info and we will get you hooked up.
Think we need to add Jared to that list the next time he doesn't have a unicorn shirt on.
All right.
It's coming in the mail.
Yeah, thanks, Davis. Thanks, Giacomo. Oh, coming all the way from Italy. Nice. Very cool. Yeah, we know everyone's probably gonna start dropping off here soon. We'll be leaving here in a few minutes, but you guys will have access to the lab for another hour. And then again, we do workshops pretty much every month unless something crazy happens. So hopefully have you guys on for some future workshops, and hopefully everybody got something fun out of it. Thanks again for everyone for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for hanging out with us today and participating, guys. We appreciate y'all.
Yeah, thanks for joining, everybody.
with that, guys, I'm going to close down the Zoom. Again, thanks for attending. Hope you guys had fun today.